Hello, everyone. Marjorie Roman here, and it's my pleasure to have, as always, our mentor in multifamily, Veena Jetti. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you.
And today we're going to talk about math. So
Yes.
first of all, we see so many numbers that you have to take care of when you're starting into real estate. Do we need a math degree for that?
Yes, you do. No, I'm just kidding. You could also just have Excel. There's that. That's
true.
the workaround.
So there are multiple things that we need to be looking at, multiple numbers that we need to be taking care of to make sure that our properties are performing. And I feel like one of them is the net operating income. So tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so the net operating income, or NOI as we like to call it. So this is the line in multifamily. So when we say above the line or below the line is the NOI. Right. So when we say, oh, it's an above the line expense, that means that it goes into the expenses above the NOI line. If we say it's below the line, it means it's like CapEx and it goes below the NOI. So what is NOI, right? It is simply our income minus our expenses equals our NOI. One important note about NOI, the debt service is not included in the NOI calculation. So it's only the operating costs of the property that are included in the expense side. So things like payroll, landscaping, your contract services, so pool maintenance, property taxes, insurance, if you have like an administrative cost, marketing, advertising, all of those things go into your expense side. And above that is your income. And so on the income side, it's simply your rent, your additional income. That's where you can count your vacancy loss, your loss to lease, your bad debt, all of that can go onto the income side. And then whatever that number is minus the operating expenses. And if you want to get like super technical on the operating expense side, there is your controllable and non-controllable expenses. So your non-controllable expenses are usually the ones that people who are new underestimate, because that's your property tax and your property insurance. And that you can't control. They just are what they are. You have to pay them regardless. But your controllable expenses are things like your administrative cost, your payroll, your advertising costs. Maybe you switch to a different ad service, or maybe you cut back on marketing, or maybe you negotiate a better landscape contract or pool contract. So that's why it's called your controllable and non-controllable expenses.
Gotcha. And it's always good to take a look at all of those expenses and all of those details, because otherwise you don't have a more accurate vision of how your building is performing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the sole way that you can determine how the asset is not just performing at any month in time, but over a historic period of 12 months. You can use the T12 or trailing 12. Another word for it in the business world would be like a profit and loss statement.
Gotcha. And we always have so many multiple terms that we can see within multifamily real estate. A few of them are underwriting, performance. So tell us what
all
are
these
those?
crazy words, right?
Yeah.
I know. It's funny because I was just talking to a friend of mine who is not in the multifamily space yet. And he's
Emphasis
like,
in yet.
Yeah, not yet. Well, he's like started dipping his toe in, and he was like, so what happened? Did like a bunch of random people sit around in a room and go like, hey, let's just make up all these terms so that it's really hard and it's like a new language. So anyone in real estate finds it really hard to enter into the multifamily space. He's like, is this just like a new barrier to entry? And I'm like, yeah.
It's kind of like the membership, you know?
Yeah, right. It sounds, he's like, why would you call it this? This is what we call it in the single family space. And I'm like, I don't know. I didn't make the rules. But yeah, so there's all these different words. So underwriting is exactly what you would think it to mean, right? It is underwriting the deal, which means you're doing a financial analysis of the deal to see, one, how it's performing, two, how it can perform, and three, what happens to different inputs and different assumptions you make. How does that affect the performance of the property or the outcome of the return to the property? And in doing that, you create what's called a pro forma. Your pro forma is simply what you think you can do on the asset over a given period of time. So you might have a 5-year pro forma, a 1-year pro forma, a 10-year pro forma. It depends on what your business plan is, but we look at a monthly pro forma and an annualized pro forma. So I want to see every month we plan to hold it, what are the possibilities of what we need to do in order to generate X amount of return.
That's right.
So it's really important. It's like a planning tool. Pro forma is simply a projection.
And if anything, it's because it also tells you well, having the underwriting, when you do your analysis and everything, you want to make sure that your property performs in a certain way.
Yes.
Throughout time.
Yes.
It cannot be super great with income just like on this certain amount of months, and then on other months you're just going to be in a loss. You don't want to run into those emergencies. Yeah, you want to make sure that it performs it performs under your goals and expectations throughout as much time as you're going to hold it.
Yes.
Now, when it comes to all of these many numbers, I know that there are some of them that affect into the NOI. So what are some of the numbers that affect the NOI?
Yeah, so the NOI, like we talked about, it's all of your income minus all of your expenses, excluding debt and excluding CapEx, which is your capital expenditures. So all of those numbers will affect your NOI. So if you increase the rent by $1, that will increase your NOI by a certain percentage or a certain amount of cents. And the reason is because for every dollar of income you increase, you're going to have expenses against it. So a dollar of income to the NOI is less than that actual dollar. But if you save a dollar on your expenses, so let's say I cut our pool contract by $1, that's a full dollar that goes to my NOI. And so I get the full benefit of saving a dollar of expense. So when you're looking at your assets, don't forget that saving a dollar is sometimes more important than increasing rent by a dollar, increasing income by a dollar.
What are some of the other factors that you look at in order to better the performance of your assets?
Yeah, we're taking a very holistic approach to our assets. We don't want to look at any one thing. So we don't just look at how we can increase rent or create additional income. We also look at how we can be more operationally efficient, right? Is there a way that we can cut down the amount of staff we need to service the property to increase the user experience? Because remember, not everything is a direct dollar to your NOI or your T12. Sometimes it's an intangible or indirect benefit. What I mean by that is, let's say you have a great solid tenant base and they really love living at your property. Well, guess what? They're probably more likely to refer another tenant who's going to be a great tenant. And maybe you can decrease bad debt or delinquency that way. So it's important to know that not every operational decision is a direct correlation, but you can see it happen indirectly to your NOI.
Right. It's not like you can have a number of likability.
Exactly.
And that's going to affect your NOI or your cap rate or any of all the other numbers. But you know that your building is performing well because you have those tenants happy at that point.
Yes.
So now let's talk about the cap rate.
Yes.
How do you calculate the cap rate when it comes to multifamily?
Okay. Everybody loves to focus on cap rates. I'm here to tell you that they're fine, but they're not the most important thing. So yes, you do need to know and understand them, but it's not the end all to be all. Like, a lot of people want to make a decision just based off of what is the cap rate. No, that's not an accurate way to make this decision, because there's many cap rates actually. There's the seller's cap rate, there's the buyer's cap rate, there's a tax adjusted cap rate, there's an operational cap rate. Like, there's so many cap rates. Generally speaking, let's kind of like simplify it a little bit, right? When we're talking about cap rate, we are talking about the NOI, net operating income, which we just talked about how to calculate, divided by the market value. And in a general instance, we can use whatever our purchase price is. And that's going to give us our cap rate or our capitalization rate. What that number means is that is the return that you're anticipating receiving if you bought the asset with just straight cash. You have no leverage on it, no debt on it. So let's just do a quick example, right? If you have $1 million in NOI and you're paying $20 million in cash for a property, 1 million divided by 20 million is 5%. So you have a 5% cap rate. So you only need 2 of those 3 numbers to solve for the third, right? Because conversely, if you know you are buying at a 5 cap and you have $1 million in NOI, if you divide 1 million divided by 0.05 or 5%, you're going to get $20 million. So you know I should be roughly paying about $20 million for this asset. And of course, you're going to have leverage and whatever, or maybe you won't, but generally you're going to have leverage. And so that's how you utilize a cap rate.
And you mentioned that, and this is not the only way to look at a deal when you're evaluating it.
Yeah.
Why do you choose to do that?
So a cap rate is good to tell us kind of where we are, where the market can go, and it gives us a good anticipation of where we can exit the asset. So we care about the cap rate in relation to where we're entering the asset. We care about it in relation to where we can operate the asset because it allows us to know how much we can generate in cash flow on the asset. But I don't care about it in the sense of, okay, we're only going to go into deals that are at a 4.5 cap. Like that's a very short-sighted way to look at an investment thesis, in my opinion. And a lot of passive investors get very focused on cap rate because there's a lot of discussion around it. A lot of investors like to talk about cap rates without truly understanding what they're for and why you like them. But let's say you have an asset that you're going into at a 5 cap. And I'm being like wildly wishful thinking here because 5 caps and Class B value assets are not happening right now. But let's say you're going into a 5 cap. It's just easier for mental math for me. But let's say you're going into a 5 cap asset. And let's say you know that by doing X, Y, and Z, you can operate it at a 5.5 cap. That all of a sudden makes a lot of sense. So maybe you're willing to pay a little bit of a premium to be in that asset because you know you can flip a switch and operate it at a higher cap rate. And then maybe when you exit, you can exit at a lower cap rate. And so there's a lot of art to looking at cap rates. It's not as cut and dry or as black and white as, okay, what's the going in cap rate? Yes, I'm willing to do it. No, I'm not.
Right. You always need to see if you have the right strategies for taking advantage of that.
Correct.
Thank you so much, Veena. And it's always really cool to see how many factors come into evaluating a deal.
Yes.
Because it's not as easy as saying this is the one number that you need to look at every single time that you're looking for a deal.
I wish it was. It would make it a lot easier. Then you don't need Excel or a math degree.
That's right. Thank you so much again. And thank you to our audience. So there you have it. There are multiple factors that you need to take care of when you're evaluating your deals. So please make sure that you take care of each of those factors so you have the best deal of your life. And we're going to see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.